I think it's normal to get really bored with
Mm.
trading. Hey, it's Walter here, and you're at the Think Profit podcast, where we're going to help you develop a rock solid trading confidence and avoid the potentially endless cycle of system switching. Right, Hugh?
That's right. We're going to help you develop a wealth mindset, develop a trading strategy that fits your core personality, and help you overcome the obstacles that stop over 90% of traders.
All right, Hugh, sounds good. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this. Hey, Walter, this is an interesting question. I want to see what you thought about it. Somebody wrote in and they asked, what happens if I'm accepting losses a little too easily? Like they don't really care about the losses, or they're kind of apathetic about it. So what do you think about that?
Well, from somebody who took three losing trades last night, which actually that's 3 out of 4, I guess, which is rare when when your win rate's like 65% or something. But yeah, I think I've been thinking about this. Actually, it's a good question. I think it depends on the person, on the trader. I don't think that the focus on the emotion necessarily helps. And what I mean by that is I think when there's a real temptation, and we've talked a lot about this in the past, but there's a real temptation to think that if you have a loss, you did something wrong and you have to fix something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's more important is for you, like when I put my trades in, I literally in my head calculate, okay, where's the account going to be if this trade loses? So like last night I had a trade, and then like 2 hours later I had 2 more trades within like 30 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I took them all, and in my head I'm calculating, okay, where's the account going to be if all of these go bad? Because I knew they were correlated, right? Like one was on the euro, another one was on the euro, and then one was on the Swissy. And so I knew that, like, do you know what I mean? Like Swissy goes up, euro goes down usually, right? So like as in terms of the chart. So I knew that like they're most likely all 3 of them were going to hit, or all 3 of them were going to lose. And in my head, I actually calculated out. You can, and I like to do this, like if you take trade 1 at, let's say, 6 o'clock in the evening, like I did, right? And then you take trades 2 and 3 around 9 or 10. I like to calculate that the first trade I took is a loser, and then calculate my risk for the remaining trades. They just assume that the first one's a loser. So I kind of mentally prepare myself for that. But what I think is more important as a trader is that I don't think it's good for everyone, but I think it's good for me to feel comfortable taking losses and to focus all of my energy on the analytics of whether or not this stretch of losing trades is acceptable in terms of the scheme of the statistics of what's to be expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a 35% win rate, you're going to have 7 losers in a row. That's almost guaranteed, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 61% win rate, like the strategy that I had 2 trades on, 61%, 2-to-1 reward risk ratio, that is more in line with, yeah, it's going to happen, right? You're going to have 2 trades. On Friday, I had a winner. So, and the winner makes twice as much as the loser. So that's always nice, right? When you have it like that. So I think if you are very anxious and lacking confidence in your trading, it's good to get comfortable losing. I think if you have a lot of confidence in your trading and you've been trading for a long time, you have your statistics, you know that you can do this. It could be that if you get too comfortable losing, you get sloppy. So there's a risk there, I think. That's my belief. So I think, in other words, another way to say this is when we first start trading, we just want to win and we need to learn to lose. And then when we get more advanced and we're more comfortable that we can pull money out of the markets, I think it's more important that you don't get so comfortable losing that it's masking another problem, right? Like, so it could be that I'm just getting really sloppy with my decision making and my execution, and so that's why I'm losing. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not, so it's more me. And if that's the case, then being really comfortable losing, that can smooth that over and make it feel like, oh, it's just another loser. Oh, it's just the odds. When actually it's me, it's the performer. Does that make sense? So I think it depends. But I think in general, if you're new to trading, that's a really important skill to have, is to learn to lose and look at the big picture, look at 50 trades, not 5 trades, right? Step back and go, that's fine. I had a couple losers. Let's just see where we're at when we add another 47 trades to this and see where the big picture is after, 50 trades. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I forgot to mention that this person is not a profitable trader,
Oh,
and
right, yeah.
they were a little worried that they were a little bit too, maybe they weren't concerned enough about the losses. I don't know if that's necessarily a good or bad thing, but I think being a little
Yeah.
apathetic, maybe you're not taking enough risk on the trade or something. That could be one thing, right?
Well, yeah, and what we see is that when people take really low risk, they get really good at executing.
Mm,
So like, you know what I mean? Like a way to practice getting good at your execution is to really bring down the risk. And Alex Upton at the London conference we had, Hugh, he had a really good talk on that, and he kind of went into that a bit in his talk from the conference.
mhm.
He said, like, when he dropped his risk way down, it was like there's really no point in taking early profits. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's a really good way to learn fundamentals, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. But could there be a point you think that maybe the risk is too low? Maybe the person there's not enough skin in the game where they're kind of like, I don't really care if I lose.
Well, I think you can always ramp that up.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
have like I have aggressive accounts where I risk like 10%, but they're like really small aggressive accounts, and they blow up. And I know that,
Mhm.
like 2 out of 10 are going to blow up, right? That's going to happen. But a few of them are going to really run, right?
Mhm.
So okay, that's a really good question what you said. I think so. The question is it possible that you have so low risk, you don't have enough skin in the game, it's like it's not really doing anything for you? This is what I would say to that. I would say I think you're better off going really low risk and ratcheting it up than the opposite. The reason why doing the opposite, starting at high and learning to pull back, because you get scarred. Okay, so you get these
Mm.
emotional. I don't know if you can remember, like when you first started trading, the big mistakes you made. I always talk about mine. It was moving my stops. So I had a stop. I was risking 2% or whatever, and then I saw the chart and I go, oh, it's going to hit my stop. So I'll move it a little bit further, below this next support level. And then it'll bounce and then I'll be fine. And so I turn these 2% stops, losses into like 6% losses, 7% losses. So it was a really bad habit. So what my belief is, and I could be wrong here, but I believe that you get scarred early on and you learn really valuable lessons as a trader. So if you were to like, just go whoom and go straight up and go really hard risk because you want to have skin in the game, you want to make it worth it or whatever, I think you can get scarred. Now some of those scars can be good. Like if you read like the Market Wizards, a lot of those guys will, in their interviews, they have a story about when they risked too much and they swore they'd never do that again. So in some ways that can be good, but some scars, like some things you can get are bad. Like you might like I did when I first started trading. We tripled my friend and I, we tripled the account, right?
Mhm.
And that was a really bad thing because that messed us up for months because couldn't figure out what went wrong after that. You know what I mean? We kept
Mhm.
blowing up
Mhm.
accounts. It's just because the first couple days we really hit it. So I think if you start low and ratchet it up, I think that's a healthier way to do it than to start high and ratchet it down, because it just depends on what happens when you start high,
Mhm.
and those things get burned into your brain as a trader. Whatever happens early on, you kind of think, okay, now I know what to do. I did that wrong and this wrong, and I'm going to do this now, and I promise to do this always, and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, cool. I mean, I totally agree with most of that stuff. I would add to that though, a couple of things. Maybe the person isn't as interested in trading as they maybe think they are. That could be one possibility. Maybe even if they are making a decent amount per win or whatever, maybe it's not doing it for them, or maybe it's not too interesting to them. That's always a possibility. I don't rule that out.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think you do get, like, it becomes boring.
Mm,
Like trading becomes boring. I think that's natural. For me, the excitement comes in the tweaking and like the new
mm,
ideas around risk, new ideas around systems, and just testing those risk strategies, risk algorithms, overlaying that on an old system, or taking an old system or a concept that you learned somewhere and tweaking it and then making it your own system and then trading it, testing it, seeing where does it fall out. To me, there's a lot of room for creativity in trading, because I agree what you said. Like, I think it's normal to get really bored with
mm.
trading eventually. Not in the beginning. I mean, it's exciting and everything. You're learning, you're reading books, or I was reading books. I mean, now you wouldn't even have to read books. You could just go on, websites and stuff.
Yeah.
I read a lot of books in the early 2000s because I wanted to learn technical analysis. So I had to read all these stock books and stuff. So, well, think about it like anything, like if you were like a good at tennis or surfing or I don't know, BMX bike riding or something, like there's a certain point where you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And you're like, I want to try something new, you know?
Mm.
And I think trading can be like that too. Like if you were a writer and let's say you wrote like a journalist or something and you had to write something every day for the newspaper or some website or something, you know, you might start experimenting with different opening lines and stuff, like different ways to, you know, open an article or a book or something. I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it can get a little bit, I guess that's natural, especially if you're proficient. Like what generally happens, what we find is that people are really good at stuff. They almost don't know what they're doing. And it takes them a while to step back and see from another perspective. Okay, then I did this, then I did that. It's when you first start doing things, you want to know, okay, what do I do here? Like driving is a good example. When you first start driving, you're like, okay, I shift, or then I look in the mirror, and then I put on the signal, and then I turn, you know, and you know, hands on the wheel, and I can't touch the radio right now. I don't have enough, you know, bandwidth for that, right? And so after a while, you can drive and talk to people, and you know, there could be like two kids fighting in the back seat. You don't even notice, like you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's all that stuff goes on when you get really good at something, and I think trading is probably no different in that way. I used to always tell like my first students when I had them, I said, you know, we want to get to the point where this is boring for you. That's the goal. And they'd say, oh, it's never gonna. Oh, I love the markets. Oh, never gonna. And then sure enough, you know, a year later or a year and a half later, they'd write me and they'd say, okay, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you really have to identify what is interesting to you in trading, right? Like what really gets you going, what really makes you stick with it. I think for me, it's a similar process, like the discovery process and figuring out like, okay, how do I figure this thing out that maybe only a very few number of people have figured out before, right? So like, I think that's the appeal to me. So if it does get boring, I think it's a matter of just kind of refreshing it and figuring out what turns you on, I guess. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because just the other day I was looking something up. I can't remember what it was, and I came on an article on your website, and I was like, "Oh, cool! Like I didn't know that you had done this. Like it was something you had tested a strategy or something. I was looking up something, and for whatever reason, yours came up. Like your article on your website was one of the top ones, and so I clicked on it. And I almost clicked on it without realizing it was your website. Like I clicked on it and I was like, oh, this is Hugh's site. And I was like, oh, cool. And then you actually had done the testing and you posted the numbers and everything. I was like, sweet, this is good. Cause I was trying to figure out, I can't remember what it was, but it was something. And I ended up, you know, you had like either a really closely associated system or, you know what I mean? Like an offshoot of it or something. And it was cool to see that. So yeah. So, and that was all born out of boredom, like me trying to like, what am I going to test? You know, what am I going to test? You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do next? I want to do something. I want to look at a new strategy. I want to build something. I want to try something out. And then that's how that happens. So, yeah. So I guess the big picture, what we're saying is it depends on where you're at. So whether or not you should be, you know, getting really, you know, lethargic and sort of not really discounting your losers depends on where you're at. Whether you should be getting really excited or really bored sort of depends on where you're at. It sort of depends on your progression as a trader and your development. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good coverage of the spectrum of it. So, all right. Thanks, Walter.
Thanks.
All information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not trading or investment advice.